Horizons, and this is greatest marine machine gunner, John Basilone, a channel Federation, I guess part two because I watched the first half of it. So yeah, so far the story has been really great about how, like, I haven't watched story about like a specific machine gunner, because anybody who doesn't know about military that much, they won't think this like, okay, there's a specific job when it comes to machine gunner. But when you think about it in detail, like how complicated it can be, it's about like tools and things, like how to maintain it, how to use it. It has its own thing. So yeah, so, training somebody to be a machine gunner, right, specifically, is like better than to just train everybody, because yeah, it's not just simple thing like some rifle or something. And machine guns are like belt and everything, right? I remember still like World War times, how the people had to like worry about how hot it can get, right? Like, what was it, like a magazine or something gets hot, it can even burn your hands. So you need to know about all these things, right? So something need to feed water constantly, right, just to keep it operational. So there's too many techniques behind it. So yeah, this story has been really great so far. Like all Federation stories, they're all badass. So yeah, let's go this one. If you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe. So I know what type of videos to react to more. I like stories like this, but yeah.
Of their ground forces in over 2,000 years and brought immeasurable shame to that chain of command. General Kawaguchi is immediately relieved of command, and his boss, General Hayotake, takes control, and it becomes his life's mission to win back Henderson Airfield to restore his honor. By August 18th, the United States Navy is able to punch through, and John and the rest of the 7th Marines show up to reinforce the Marines on Guadalcanal. Over the course of the coming days, they offload all of the 7th Marines onto Guadalcanal, but on September 23rd, before all of the Marines have disembarked from their ships, they get ambushed at the Medicao River. Chesty Puller, hearing that some of his men are cut off and surrounded, commandeers the United States naval destroyer, the USS Ballard, takes it under his command, gets it as close as he can to their position, and calls in the naval gunfire on the enemy himself. He then loads up all the landing vessels that he has with as many Marines as he possibly can and begins leading them into the fight to save his men. And Chesty is right there leading from the very first Higgins boat, and it gets so bad from enemy gunfire coming in on these Higgins boats that the naval coxswain, the pilot of the ship, goes and starts turning the boat around, and all the other boats are going to start following, at which point Chesty orders him to keep going, and he fights him on it, and Chesty pulls out his Colt 45 and says that he will shoot him himself if he doesn't steer that fucking boat to that beach. Chesty lands, goes out, saves his men, and to be clear, John wasn't there during the actual battle, but he saw all of this unfold, he heard about it, and it reinforced everything that he thought and knew in his heart, that if he wanted to be a good leader, he had to lead from the front and be willing to risk himself for his men. So all the Marines get out on Guadalcanal. The biggest objective in the war right now is defending Henderson Airfield. This is the most important stretch of land on the planet at this point in time. So John and his 11 men are set up on this ridge right outside Henderson Airfield. They have 2 foxholes, 1 machine gun team in each, and they are covering a 2,500 yard span of the Marine front line, and they absolutely cannot allow the Japanese to get past it. On October 23rd, General Hayotake, who, remember, feels that he has been shamed by allowing his subordinate to lose to the Americans for the first time in 2,000 years. He is willing to die to win this fight, and he sends all the men that he has directly towards the Marine Corps' front line. And hundreds of them are headed directly towards John Basilone and his 11 men. The Japanese soldiers headed towards John and his men were covered in leaves for camouflage, and there was...
Yeah, people a lot of time don't realize like fight between Americans and Japanese in World War II were like kind of different, because how Japanese were, how they thought, how their whole processes were, right? Honor mentality and all that, right? Obviously when you like see how they treated their prisoners, like where does honor fall? But their whole mentality was that for their own country. So like Fredrickson just said, he thought like, okay, I'll die before anything else happens, right? Because results matter at this point, because he lost battle before that. So the whole psychology and mentality of Japanese makes them really dangerous, right? Even besides the numbers, right? We've seen like many even recent wars with Russia, Ukraine, and many other wars. Like numbers don't matter much. Matter, but doesn't matter at the level we think. It's not all mathematics. It's not all like that. Oh, this is this many tanks. This is this many tanks. This many troops. In the end, like how it works, who's in charge, how motivated they are, how motivated the soldiers are. This all matters. So Japanese fighting Japanese, especially in Pacific, was complete insanity.
so many of them that Basilone's men said it looked like the jungle itself was coming to eat them. And while that is horrifying, you have to remember that John and his men have 2 heavy machine guns with overlapping fields of fire and the high ground. It's going to take a literal army to uproot John and his men. John and his men start mowing down wave after wave of Japanese infantry, and they just keep coming because they are under the command of General Hayotake, and this man is willing to die to win his honor back, and he's willing to sacrifice all of his men as well. Not only are John and his men metaphorically stacking bodies, they're literally stacking bodies to the point that it actually becomes a legitimate problem. John has to get out of the foxhole and push over piles of dead corpses because they're beginning to obstruct the view from his machine gun positions. They fight for hours, mowing down wave after wave of enemy, and by the end of the first day, John has lost 4 men.
What is this? Like, this is this shit is like video game. I say that every time. This shit is like video game. Like, you know, like creative. What is a creation engine from Bethesda Game Studios? A lot of like objects are cluttering out to remove them. Oh, by the way, these are real people and real body in a real event, not a video game. Imagine that mentality. Like, I'm moving down so many people. Literal human bodies are under my sight. So I have to remove that just so I can operate again. That shit is insanity, especially if you like witness that, because you think like, okay, this is their mentality. They'll all die before surrendering. Like I just said, like that's completely different thing to, you know, like the attack against.
And killed who knows how many Japanese in return. On the second day, they still weren't able to get past Basilone and his men, but they were able to punch through the Marine Corps line on John's right flank, and they surrounded John and his men. Okay, so at this point, on one hand, this is a horrible situation to be in, but on the other hand, this is exactly the type of shit Marines are into, okay? This is what they call a target-rich environment, and now that they're surrounded, the enemy doesn't have anywhere else to go but to fight them. This is exactly what they want. The only problem now is that the rest of the force is cut off from him, so he can't get any more ammunition or water for the guns, and to make things worse, he's been fighting for so long, his fucking wool socks are wet. So at this point, John's like, fuck it, I'm gonna go get the ammo myself. He takes off his boots, he takes off his wet wool socks, grabs a machete and his Colt 45 1911, and takes off through enemy lines to go get more ammunition and water for his men. John not only makes it through the enemy lines barefoot, he actually gets more ammo, more barrels, and more water for the guns, and makes it back to his men. And over the course of the next day, he does this 2 more times. John and his men continuing to fight the entire time, mowing down scores of enemy soldiers. But slowly, John starts losing more and more men. First it was 4, and then 2 more, and then he's lost 8 men, and then suddenly it was down to John and just 2 others. At this point, they had to improvise new tactics. They didn't have enough men to man 2 heavy machine guns. So John became the gunner, trying to make every single last round count. And then when John ran out of ammo on one gun, he would hop over to the other gun while his 2 men reloaded and refitted that initial gun, and they would just bounce back and forth, fighting as long as they possibly could. This goes on for hours, and John and his men can't keep up. John would burn through all the ammunition in one machine gun before the next gun was ready. So John had to engage the enemy in hand-to-hand combat at their foxhole to buy his men more time to get the guns up. And then that goes on for hours.
Are you telling me that he's moving down people, but they're coming so close that when there is a lag between two guns, they literally jump inside the hole and fight them hand to hand? This is Hollywood shit. Again, I say that every time, but this is like, imagine that scenery. Like, he's moving down with machine gun. Oh, by the way, it's empty. Oh, that one's not reloaded. Enough of time that somebody can jump inside and they have to fight it. Right? What is this, Marvel? How is this impossible? There are like only 2-3 of them, right? You're surprised they didn't die, right? With just, in movies people survive because they're plot armors. In real life, they don't, right? Like a bullet that just come out of anywhere, right? Maybe a cut to like your artery or something. You're gonna bleed out, right? Shit like this is like lucky as F, right? But then again, like people like this get lucky a lot. So is that luck or is that skill, right? If you get lucky too much, is that really a luck? Like at that point, come on.
John Basilone kills 38 enemy soldiers at or in his foxhole in close quarters combat, buying his men more time. And just as things are starting to look really, really dark, like this is gonna be the end, dark, we're almost out of ammunition, we can't keep doing this, Chesty Puller comes through again, rallies the Marines, pushes back the Japanese forces, and restores the initial line. Over the course of the entire battle, not just John's section alone, the Marine Corps had managed to kill 2,500 Japanese soldiers, forcing them into a retreat. General Hayotake again had been defeated, and this time the blame laid squarely on his shoulders, and because of this, he commits... Can't say that word on YouTube. Anyways, by the time reinforcements get to Basilone...
You can say... Okay, I was going to say it, but I stopped. You can see the Japanese word for it, right? I'm pretty sure YouTube's not gonna think of, oh, I know Japanese as well, so I don't know how strong YouTube would go.
His men, there is dead dudes absolutely everywhere. There's 38 of them in or around the foxhole. All of those kills were credited to Basilone in close quarters combat, and his fields of fire look like the most aerodynamic mass grave you've ever seen. There was so many they quit counting after 150. For the next 18 days, the Marines launched counterattacks, chasing the retreating Japanese forces all over Guadalcanal before eventually kicking them off the island altogether. But the fight's not over yet. The Japanese are going to come back, and they're going to come back with everything they absolutely have. Off the coast of Guadalcanal is a bunch of Japanese battleships, and they are there to secure a route for more Japanese soldiers to make it onto the beach through landing craft. But this time, the US Navy is going to surprise them in the middle of the night. There's this crazy battleship commander by the name of Willis Lee, aka Ching Lee, a 5-time Olympic gold medalist sharpshooter and tactical genius that has just pioneered and perfected the method of using radar to find targets for naval gunfire, giving them an unprecedented...
Wait a minute, did he make a video about that, or did he talk about him in the past? Because I know that name. If he didn't, like, he made so many videos, like I'm forgetting, but if he didn't make a video about him, I'm pretty sure he talked about him.
An advantage at night fighting. On the night of November 14th, he engages a Japanese battleship detachment with his ship, the USS Washington, sinking their flagship, the IJN Kirishima. This forces the rest of the Japanese naval detachment to retreat, squashing any hope of Japanese reinforcements hitting the beach, effectively securing the island and turning the entire tide of the war in the Pacific. By January 1st, 1943, John and the rest of the 7th Marines were sent to Melbourne, Australia to recover from months of intense combat. And once the Marines get there, it turns into one gigantic party, because now the people of Australia have been living under the worry that the Japanese were going to invade them next. And now they're tucking their tail and they're running from the Marine Corps and the United States Navy. The Marines are heroes to every single person in Australia. The Australians were so grateful to the Marines, it said that there wasn't a single bar or home in Australia that wasn't open to a United
Australia is like, when you see a map, like you won't understand why the fuck my hand is so red. Okay, Sony camera is weird, like color thing. Okay, that's red, that's not, I don't know. Yeah, so when you see a 2D map, right, you won't realize like how close Japan and like Australia is, because Pacific is like, you know, like when you take a globe and like make it in 2D, it's gonna warp certain areas, right? But if you see it in a globe way, right, America and like kind of like splits apart like this, and it creates this weird way where, you know, Japan can from jump to island from Samoa and everything, like Australia just there, it's like in the root type of way. So Australia was always under threat when it comes to Japan, right? Even before all this, when Japan was becoming more and more aggressive, slowly trying to dominate Pacific, Australians knew like, oh shit, this is gonna happen one day.
States Marine, and they couldn't pay for one of their own drinks even if they wanted to. For an entire month, John Basilone is wearing his piss cutter sideways, absolutely hammered. And then one day he wakes up at like noon, probably still half drunk, feels like he's been hit by a truck, and his arm is just absolutely on fire. So he sits up out of bed, he looks over at his arm is just all bandaged up, and he has no idea why or what happened, and he's like worried that he like did something stupid, he jumped off a roof, broke his arm, something happened. He doesn't really know. Regardless of what happened or how hurt he is, he can't really do anything about it, and he's starving, and he can do something about that, so he doesn't even bother.
Imagine having some kind of a OCD, right? I don't know if it's OCD, like everything's a spectrum, right? But I know there's certain type of OCD, like it will annoy you, right? It will you won't be able to sleep properly if you don't know certain things. You have to know that certain things. And imagine being drunk or like being on any kind of drugs where you have a blackout. A blackout could be one of the worst things a person can have with that kind of OCD. Again, OCD is spectrum, different type of OCD. So I'm talking about specific where somebody obsesses over like every detail, obsess over you know, like every time, like if you're thinking about something and then you stop thinking about that and like distracted, and then suddenly like, wait a minute, what was I thinking? And I remember that will eat at you. Imagine the blackout. Holy shit, what happened? Like that will fuck up your multiple days.
To look at his arm or see what's underneath that bandage. He just staggers out of the barracks and goes to the chow hall. So he's in the chow hall getting food, and another Marine comes up to him and is like, yeah, death or dishonor, right? And John Basilone's like, what? He goes, your tattoo that you got last night. Everybody was watching and cheering. And he's like, and he looks underneath the bandage, and he's now got a gigantic tattoo on his arm that says death or dishonor. Now at this point, John is like partially relieved that he's not severely injured, but on the other hand, he's like, man, I got so hammered I got a tattoo and didn't even know it. Maybe I should tone it down just a little bit. Which works out because by this point in time, the party's kind of dying down. The Marines go into this like recovery type.
I mean, everything's fine. You don't want a tattoo one day. You wake up like, what tattoo did I get? It says crazy bitch. You don't want that, right? You don't know what you're gonna do when you're drunk. So yeah, I think this when you start to make permanent changes to your body, that's when you need to stop.
They're kind of like out in the woods, living in barracks and tents, and they're just kind of hanging out until they get more orders. So that's fine, that's great, that's wonderful. The only annoying thing that's really going on at this point in time is in Australia, there's this fucking bird that's got the most obnoxious call on the planet, and it's called a kookaburra. John and the rest of the Marines absolutely hate these birds because of how obnoxious they are, to the point that they start opening fire on the birds whenever they hear them just to get them to shut the fuck up.
I'm glad he started talking but still kept that noise going in the background. That was great. And also the bullet shot.
Fuck up. At which point the chain of command is like, you guys need to stop. You can't keep shooting at these tiny birds with Browning machine guns, okay? Quit it. They didn't. They kept doing it. And then whenever the chain of command asked what they were doing, they would say they thought they saw a Japanese spy just to get these birds to be quiet. This goes on for months, just hanging out in the woods, recovering, shooting at these annoying birds. And then by May, John finds out that he is going to be awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions on Guadalcanal. Initially, he is told that he's going to go back to the United States, and FDR himself is going to put the Medal of Honor around John's neck in front of his friends and family in his hometown. But John doesn't really feel like he deserves it, or he has feelings that there's other men that deserve it just as much as he does. He said, and I quote, "I just happened to be there. Anyone would have done the same in my place." And because of this, he feels like that Medal of Honor doesn't just belong to him, it also belongs to his men. So he actually opted to have the Medal of Honor ceremony in Australia on May 21st with his men present. And at this point, the Marine Corps realizes they have a unique opportunity. They've got John Basilone, this young, good-looking, 185-pound brick shithouse of a Marine that's got 19 knockouts in boxing and the Medal of Honor around his neck. And they ship him back home, and he's going to be doing war bond tours to raise money for the war. For the next month, John gets paraded around the United States with the goal of raising $15 billion in war bonds, and in less than 30 days, he raises $19 billion. And John Basilone hates absolutely every second of it. He did not want to leave his men, and he definitely does not want to get paraded around the United States giving talks and speeches. It reminds him of being in school, having to go up in front of the class, and he absolutely...
Yeah, democracy and freedom always has certain elements in the edges of it that could feel like bittersweet. The center's more important, so yeah, you deal with it. Because obviously you need to raise money. It's a democracy, right? USA is democracy in the end. So yeah, you need to raise money. You need people support. You need PR and everything. So every story always ends up like somebody is like really like, like a hero or something. Always gets shipped back home, uses like a celebrity or PR just to raise awareness and like money, right? Like raise PR for like war efforts and things. And that's kind of important, right? And obviously people are going to think like, why the fuck would I do that when I can be used on the battlefield? But I would argue like they are being used more. Like all that money will fund a lot of people, right? Fund a lot of ammunition. Like if any badass guy would have been in the battlefield, like sure, they would have like made a big difference. But this is like single-handedly making even larger difference with all the support, money and PR and everything, right? Not to mention moral support. Right? When people see that, like it's a moral support, right? You've seen so many stories where like everything was going shit about this Japanese theater thing, right? Everything was going to shit, but somebody doing something in the Philippines and things just basically changed the tide where everybody's moral support just like through the roof.
Absolutely hates school. He just grits his teeth and bears through it, trying to do the right thing. And then eventually, after he raises all this money and the war bond tour is over, he asks to get shipped back out to rejoin his men. He is immediately denied. He's far too valuable. They cannot have the news headlines reading that war hero, Medal of Honor recipient John Basilone dies in combat, so they make him a guard at a naval shipyard.
This is the worst.
I mean, Japanese would be gunning for him as well, right? Like, it would work as reverse in Japan. If they kill this guy, oh, we killed an American hero. Like shit is changing type of way. So like at that point, this becomes like MVP, right? He becomes automatically like most valuable player on the battlefield, one of the at least, right? So you have to remove that because it becomes like automatic, like, oh, if you shoot this guy's 5 point, but if you shoot that guy's 50 point, again, game analogy, whatever. But yeah, shit like that. So yeah, you need to remove them.
This goes on for months and months, just John stuck inside of a guard shack, similar to that classroom that he hated as a child. And it's just eating away at him. He starts to become an alcoholic. It's just the loneliest he's ever been
Depressing.
in his entire life, and he hates every single second of it. And then in November of 1944, he hears word that his old unit under the command of Chesty Puller is almost wiped out at the Battle of Peleliu. And this is the last straw for John Basilone. He's not going to sit in this guard shack anymore while his men are out there fighting and dying.
Just go by yourself.
He storms into General Vandergrift's office, the same man that pinned the Medal of Honor on his chest in Australia, and tells him the newspapers are going to read one of two things. They're going to read that you had to court-martial war hero John Basilone, or they're going to read that John Basilone is returning to the Pacific. You can pick which one. And then he says, and I quote, "How's it going to look if we retake Manila and Manila John isn't there? I'm staying with my boys. They need me." Within days...
Okay, 6 minutes left into this video. And the final battle is coming. So I'm gonna guess this is not gonna end well. Ah, fuck. I'll be surprised if that's not the case, but okay.
John is given orders to report to Camp Pendleton, where he is going to lead a machine gun platoon that's getting ready to ship out to the Pacific. But before that, he's given 3 days of leave to go back home to Raritan, New Jersey and get his affairs in order. And while he is there, he has his third and final vision, and it is alarmingly clear to him that he is going to die in combat. Despite that, it doesn't even really faze him because he knows it's his destiny. He tells his brother that he had this vision. His brother doesn't quite believe him. He gets his affairs in order and he heads off to Camp Pendleton. While there, he meets Lena, a female Marine cook, falls in love with her, and they get married almost immediately, and they have 1 month together at Camp Pendleton.
Good relations with the Wookiees I have.
After his month in Camp Pendleton with his new bride, he ships out to Hawaii, and he's got 4 months there to train his machine gun platoon to get ready for combat. While there, John does absolutely everything he can to get his men ready for combat. He shares everything he knows. He makes sure that they know that machine gun inside and out. When they do amphibious landings, if they're able to get that machine gun onto the beach up and running, he walks up and throws wet sand into the gun himself so that they get used to clearing malfunctions. After 4 months of training in Hawaii, they're told that they're shipping out and to board this ship, and they don't even tell them where they're going yet again. Same thing happens again. A couple days out at sea, they announce over the loudspeakers that they are going to be taking part in the invasion of Iwo Jima, which translates to Sulphur Island. This is going to be nothing like anything John has ever experienced, or any other Marine for that matter. The entire island is not covered in jungles like all the other ones. Iwo Jima is just straight volcanic ash that looks like this. The reason they need this island is because it's the only island big enough and in the right place that they're going to be able to land the new B-24 bombers on top of, and those are going to be critical in winning the rest of the war. This invasion is going to be absolutely massive. It's the biggest amphibious invasion in United States Marine Corps history. Over 800 warships, 250,000 men, and 70,000 Marines. John and his men are going to be landing on Red Beach too, and as the first wave lands on Red Beach, nothing really happens. There's a little bit of enemy sniper fire here and there, but there wasn't artillery, there wasn't mortars, they weren't opening up on them with machine guns while they were in the Higgins boats, and as soon as they get on the beach, there's nothing there either. So the Marines just kind of lay down and get low, trying to not be an easy target for a sniper, and then the second wave lands, and then the third, and then John's on the beach with his men on Red Beach too, and he looks out and just sees clustered Marines laying along this beach on volcanic ash that you can't dig into, and he has the oh fuck moment, and he realizes what's about to happen. The Japanese absolutely have every square inch of this beach sighted in with mortars and artillery, and there's pillboxes and bunkhouses off in the distance that are probably concealed and you just can't see them yet. Chuck Tatum, one of John Basilone's men, was laying down at the time, and he said that everybody had this feeling of like, maybe this is going to be an easy day. Maybe the Japanese got scared and they fled and retreated already out of the gate and we've already won. And then he hears John Basilone start screaming, "Get the fuck up and start moving up the beach or you're gonna die," as he literally starts kicking Marines in the ass and dragging them up by their collars.
Oh, shit. Oh. Only guy who realized, oh, fuck me, we're just like sitting duck here. Yeah, that is their plan. No way Japanese just like walked away. That doesn't sound like Japanese in World War II. Yeah, artillery is coming. Holy shit. And especially when they're stacked up like that, wave after wave, like they're all parked in those they're all parked on this beach. It's like, okay, bomb the shit out of beach, like 80% dead. That shit is insanity, right? So you realize that everybody's like, oh, maybe this is easy. No. This feels like, you know, like very movie-esque, right? Who's that, like Patriot guy? Who's that? I forgot his name. Mel Gibson. Yeah, it feels like Mel Gibson thing, right? Like Mel Gibson realized, oh, something's happening, like screams at people. Very protagonist level shit.
and ordering them to push forward. And as soon as that happens, the Japanese open up with mortars, artillery, and the pillboxes unconceal themselves and start mowing down Marines with machine gun fire. There's nothing he can do about the mortars or artillery, but maybe John can do something about these pillboxes and the machine gun fire. There's one big Japanese bunkhouse.
All of that, they didn't like analyze that before, because I've seen World War II videos from Federation where they like got like plain images and photos before Normandy storming and everything. So they didn't do something like that in Iwo Jima, like, okay, this is the beach, it doesn't feel like we can dig in or something. Like, didn't make plan like that, they just went there. This feels like like somebody like who didn't thought it through or something, or just like, oh, it's gonna be fine type of mentality. I don't know, maybe they couldn't do that around Pacific Theater, I don't know.
Up ahead that's mowing down Marines with its machine gun. John orders his men to get their machine guns up and start returning fire into the window holes of this bunkhouse. Once his men start laying down suppressing fire, hopefully keeping the Japanese from manning their guns effectively, John goes, he finds a demolition guy and a flamethrower, and he orders them to walk right up the machine gun's field of fire, right next to the bullets whizzing past him. It seems sketchy, but is literally the safest place to be right now. As soon as the demo man and the flamethrower almost make it to the window on the bunkhouse, John steps over his gunner, unhooks the machine gun from the tripod, grabs it by the handle around the barrel, effectively known as a Basilone bail. After this, yells at his man to grab the ammunition and starts running up the beach as the demo man throws a satchel charge into the window and the flamethrower starts hitting all the windows with his flamethrower. John runs all the way up the beach. He runs up the hill that this bunkhouse is built into, and once he gets to the top of the hill, while holding the gun in his hands, he mows down all the Japanese running out the backside of the bunkhouse. At the top of the hill, John can see the airfield they need to take off in the distance, so he gets his machine gunner set up, gets the men that he has set up in a defensive position, and goes back down the beach to get the rest of his men, just like his mentor Chesty Puller would. He makes it back to the base of the beach, he gets all of his men, and they start making their way up the beach to secure this position. And then suddenly, John and 5 of his men are hit with a mortar, killing all of them. John Basilone is credited with saving dozens, if not hundreds of Marines with his actions on the beach that day. For this, he was nominated for a second Medal of Honor, but by this point in time, it had become...
Okay, I don't believe in like visions and shit like that. But this guy was near invincible doing the machine gun thing. Like I said, it feels like movie like shit, right? He's moving down people, and between the reloads, there is a gap. That gap is like just enough where people can jump inside the hole and fight him, melee style. Because that's how fast people were like approaching his machine gun thing while he was moving down. And somehow 3 of them survived that, right? John survived that. So he survived ridiculous shit. And then he gets a vision. By the way, I'm probably going to die here. And then he goes to Iwo Jima basically and dies. Like, again, I don't like this, but just like, yeah. When you hear shit like this, like I don't know what to think this, right? Because somebody who's like like plot armor level shit with him, like he knew he was gonna die and he died. Now, obviously, you could say like maybe because he thought he's gonna die, so he became a bit reckless because he's like, oh, I'm gonna die anyway. But I don't like that, and I don't like that because people were at stake. He was trying to save people's life. He wasn't trying to be reckless. He didn't know when he was gonna die, so I don't know.
Become common practice to never award the Medal of Honor twice, so he was posthumously awarded a Navy Cross and a Purple Heart, becoming one of the most decorated Marines of all time. And many of the Marines that he saved that day would go on to take Iwo Jima and ultimately win World War II. And that is the story of John Basilone, Manila John, the greatest machine gunner to ever live. Thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch over at thefatelectrician.com. Black Bang out. I absolutely hate endings like that.
I knew 6 minutes is left, and I'm like, oh, fuck, miss last battle. Yeah, I know how Federation video goes. He is gonna die. I kind of knew that. And then that music played. I'm like, come on. So, yeah. Man, I love stories like this, right? Because I know, there have been movies like this, but not like major ass movies where people just like, mainstream movies, let's just call it, right? Because they said in the past, like, okay, why nobody makes a movie about that? And somebody comments like, there have been movie. What I mean is like mainstream, where like people watch with big stars and shit. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know, man. Stories like this is absolutely insane. Right, well, if you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe. You can really help out this channel by helping the algorithm and shit. And the more engagement I get in any video, I know which type of videos to react to more. And yeah, if you haven't seen the part 1, I guess by the end, like, yeah, It's too late now. But if you haven't seen the part 1, like I'll, like comment down or link in description or something. And yeah, I'll see you next time.